All right, so the last presentation for today is Paul talking to us about what actually? Getting rich, rich text and Markdown and stuff, and yeah, enjoy.
It is unlikely that any of us will get rich on rich text. That's step one. So I've been, for quite a while now, most of my connection to Plan 9 has actually been through Acme. I don't get to run Plan 9 often enough in my day job, but I get to edit a lot of files. So Acme has been my daily driver for 20 plus years, and I get tired of some of its limitations sometimes. So part of this exercise, or something that's happened, is that I wanted to see if I could make it behave a little bit more like a modern editor than it has been. So I hope everyone has a little, at least a passing idea of what Acme is. I'm actually sitting in my version of Acme now. And it's this idea that it's an integrating editor, that you have tiled windows for your text, and that the text is active in a bunch of interesting ways. That you can middle click to execute the text, which might give you to an internal command. It might spawn an external command. You have right clicking that looks for things, and there are all sorts of heuristics around how it should look. If the thing you're clicking looks like a file name, it'll open that file name. If it doesn't know what to do with it, it might plummet to the plumber. There's a bunch of, and the heuristics are heuristic. And they really match how people use this thing, 25 years ago when Rob was working on it. I extended mine so that it handles, HTTP : in a reasonable way, and so on. It doesn't make it a brand new fancy tool that's as usable as it is today, as development tools tend to be today. The other thing that it does is that it exposes a file system interface to all of the window manipulation, text manipulation. You can do pretty much anything except one thing that I'll talk about a bit later, using that file system interface to watch what's going on in a window and to respond to events in windows. So that gives an extensibility framework that's really worth digging into. Now, over time, I'd wanted to extend Acme to do more things I didn't write in the slides. I don't know if you've ever opened the lid on the Acme code base. It really shows that it's from like 1992. There is a lot of shared state all over the place. There's a lot of global variables. There's, let's just say that it's the kind of software that you write in a fever dream over a couple of weeks, which is how Rob wrote it. And it hasn't actually been reworked. It's been quite fragile. A few years ago, a few decades ago, I did scrolling tags because the tags were too short to hold all of the things that you might want in the tags. Added those scrolling tags. That was a minefield of latent bugs that eventually Russ rewrote, because Russ has more patience with that subtle code than I did. Never change the font of your tag and not the font of your window. That does terrible things for you. Anyways, that keeps happening. I've tried to do rich text, colored text in Acme at least 3 times in the last 20 years. I've bounced off it each time. I just ran out of that fevered caffeine dream and just never got to the end of it. As a part to getting there, I was talking with Rob Kroger one day, and we thought, we could just rewrite this thing in Go and try to do it in a more modern software engineering way. And what we wound up with was a lovely pile of less tightly coupled code than the original Acme, but in Go and manageable. And that thing we've called Edwood, because after all, it's an editor and it's in Plan 9. So. So Acme has like one important design constraint that kind of blocks you from doing rich text. You only have single height, single color text. That's it. The text in your window is a stream of Unicode characters, a stream of runes. It actually does a whole pile of ugly work to interpret the runes correctly. That's part of the brittleness of the original Acme code. That brittleness is less bad in Edwood, where the rune handling in Go is somewhat better than you get in C. So that's been a help. Acme, completely avoids the complexities of any rich layout. It really is just for straight text. But people keep asking for things. People want syntax coloring these days. They want their editor to actually color their code so that they can tell what's a keyword and what's not. And Rob has strong opinions on this. Rob Pike has strong opinions on this. It's like, what the hell are you thinking? Can't you read? He's not entirely wrong, but it's a very common request, and frankly, a lot of people are just turned right off from even using the editor in that space without that tool. We're starting to see LSP tools turning up that actually work reasonably well as external tools, but can't color and don't have the resources to, or the tools available in Acme to do good annotation in space, in that space. The evil machines that are now writing code for us require us to build a lot of Markdown documents. Markdown is not a pleasant thing to edit in Acme. That's single, I'll show you some hideous Markdown. The rendering for Markdown, when you don't actually render it, gives you basically craptastic looking text that you're trying to get intent and formatting into, but don't get to display. So rather than, so I wind up not using Acme to deal with my Markdown, and I wind up being frustrated that I can't chord my copy paste my text. I can't edit like a normal human being. I just wind up having to work in terrible WYSIWYG pointing at stuff kind of software that I can't stand. So, you start scratching your own itch, and you figure out that you want to do some sort of rich text. That leads to building an interface to Edwood, to Acme, that has the same kind of flavor as the rest of the interfaces to it, to say, how do I color text? And we're going to make a choice on that. We're going to try to be a bit opinionated about how text gets formatted, how it comes in, so that we can start with just coloring text, for instance. And then we add more of the features, like dealing with different font sizes and working our way through those. And we wound up eventually with full Markdown, which is what you're actually seeing. These slides are just straight up Markdown that I can move to plain text, and here we go. That's the source behind the slides as Markdown. That's handy to be able to edit in place as well that way. No. There, I need my navigation buttons. So we started, I started by building just a rich frame, like literally taking libframe and saying, how do I add to it so that every rune can have a different piece of formatting? And so we build, a style struct and a bunch of spans. And so the idea is that a span is 2 rune indices and a style that's associated with them. So we just say, from character 12 to character 13, or character 47, I don't care, I'd like them to be colored. And so we hand it a struct that says, 12 to 13 and the color. So that gets, all of the content then gets managed into a set of spans. You start with one global span that is the entire file, and then as you cut it up, you just build more spans, nesting the spans interleaving the spans as you add more spans on the way through. If you don't specify a span explicitly, it just keeps staying with whatever the default was surrounding it. So really simple algorithmically, a bit of annoyance for searching for it. I haven't addressed the performance questions in this work yet. And there are absolutely performance questions when you start dealing with large files. So we can come back to those at the end. I thought I deleted this slide because we don't need to talk about it. So as soon as you have spans, now you have a way to communicate, and you can start saying, let's build a span file. So we have another virtual file called spans, and it has a small vocabulary for how you specify spans on the way through. This is, stuff you can write to the file. On first write to the file, the window you're in goes from using the regular text, the regular frame, to using the rich frame, and starts coloring according to the instructions in the span file that you've handed in. And so this is, a quick example of what that span, what a span looks like to color func main appropriately, which if I'd been smart, I would have actually colored correctly, but I didn't. And this is, let's see, we can go to, yeah. So there's essentially the per line format of the protocol that says, I want the offset of the rune that starts coloring this span, or that starts working with this style that we're going to hit, a length, a foreground color, a background color, and then the grab bag of flags that's evolved into a big pitch pile of crap. But it includes things like chances for sizes or italics, bold, hidden. It starts with the simplest version, and that gets us what we need for syntax coloring, like this. All right, so here's some Go code. We do a couple of things. So the edcolor program runs on this, detects that it's Go, does the simple tokenization using the Go library. We also do Rust and Python, which are other languages I have to work in frequently, and just spits out the spans. And it, as you see, it colors and it keeps up. So it will color appropriately until it discovers that's no longer a keyword, and boom, get decolored from not being a keyword. So this edcolor keeps this live, keeps it up to date as you're running through. I'm going to undo those before I kill some code. And my undo is messed up. Hello? Okay, I guess we're good. I shouldn't edit code live. That's a very bad thing to do. So one of the main rules, though, is spans need to be contiguous and non-overlapping in a sequence that you give it. And because you break that, of course, you'll wind up with, if they're not contiguous, it's too slow to operate. If they start to overlap, I would like to say that last one specified wins. It's not clear to me the data structure survives that. So it's very prototype stage still. There's a bunch of uglies because, of course, we've got two programs. You've got the user and you've got edcolor that are both looking at the same stream and causing modifications in presentation. This is racy. There's a 100 millisecond debounce on it to help resolve that race so that there's a chance for edcolor to catch up at the right moments. It's an ugly detail, but again, it comes back to some things we'll talk about later about quality of code. We use a gap buffer internally to store the runs, but I'm not going to say too much about it. Edwood itself used a gap buffer for a long time until we upgraded to a more beefy rope structure of some sort. Rob Kroger knows those details and I don't. I actually have two paths for doing Markdown in Edwood right now. One is the view that you're seeing in the slides. The other is the view that we're about to see here, where we have all of the text that's in the original Markdown so that you can see all of your formatting characters and so on, which makes it much easier to edit. And the effect of the Markdown laid out. So, the image gets included, there's the image tag, and there's my image that came out. Tables likewise get formatted, but all of the decoration is the markup directly. We handle some cases like tables being too wide by adding horizontal scroll bars so that we can actually get through them when you've got a narrow window. The horizontal scroll bar code and the vertical scroll bar code are now the same code, which pleases me to no end. So that's a chunk of it. And we handle code blocks similarly. And we can those wind up scrolling. We handle lists. We handled mixed content of we can indent scroll blocks appropriately in quoting and so on. So those are recursive in that sense. When we started adding all of these features, it got, again, more complicated. If you're starting with just coloring, you have a nice simple system. The spans are very easy to deal with. But when you start doing Markdown, you start needing to deal with a recursive structure. And actually, we'll deal with a more important structure first, one you've been seeing me use. I've been advancing the slides by clicking on my slide plus or slide minus, which, if I go and hide the mark, let's click plain and see if I don't crash. There we go. The next slide structures are, little links, basically. So they're Markdown links where we have the text in front that's going to display, and then afterwards, the link that we're going to anchor to. This could be, this is typically an HTTP link, but in this case, it's just something I can be3. So I'm saying where I present slide minus, I want to plumb this text or execute this text. Plumb, I guess, B3 execute the text. And that then goes and finds the next piece. You'll note that gives us a problem, is that, of course, everything else in Acme, when you B3, it uses these heuristics to expand and sends that literal text to the plumber. Now we have this indirection that's happened. And I went looking, thinking that you could handle that by using the events file, that the events file would have a way to catch the B3 events. No, they're actually not exposed. So we exposed them. So let's go back to viewing our slides. So now there's an S selection event for when you select with B3 in various ways. And right now, it just does this simple substitution of saying what it was that was in the span, and the span provides the selection goes back to whatever program was running in backing this up. And that's interpreting then to substitute this text to the plumber. So it's a little hideous to have to add it, but apparently this is the first program that ever decided it wanted to track B3 clicks in a mechanical way, in a programmatic way. So we'll say some more about B3 in future work. It does a couple of other things too. So edcolor uses it to do highlighting of text. Like if I want to find my QQ zeros, you'll notice the QQ0 up here is now lightly highlighted, so I can find the other occurrences of that variable. So as soon as I select something, that selection is highlighted now throughout the document, which I find handy when I don't actually want to be clicking to each selection to have them all highlighted for me when I'm looking at a loop. And then the Markdown tool uses it more extensively for link substitution. No. We were. So I guess I talked a little bit about edcolor, but it does the usual thing. It opens up, it looks for the window ID, it connects itself, and off we go. Yeah. And, awkwardly, again, these things are racy because we're talking between them and we keep a debounce buffer. So. We're opinionated about colors because we should be opinionated about these things. If you want to change your colors, you can recompile edcolor and have different colors. But we like to be opinionated, and these are the one true colors of edcolor. So the first version of the Markdown is the one you're looking at in the slides. That was actually implemented entirely within Edwood directly, rather than externalizing it. And I didn't want to externalize it because of the complexity of dealing with tables and images and nesting of tables and all of that on a protocol for spans. And it led to a thing that's usable that I really architecturally dislike, because it's baking all of this knowledge about Markdown straight into the editor. And I let it sit that way. That's how it was when I submitted the paper. I let it sit that way, and it's done reasonably well. But now the question was, how do we actually externalize it? And about a week and a half ago, I made the leap to say, screw it. Let's figure out if we can do a region setup in the spans. I don't know if I want to do this for real, for long term, but I like doing it better than doing this large Markdown interpreter inside Edwood. And so it adds this idea of a recursive region to this spans protocol. And these recursive regions then reopen another section where we can now do some work. It adds some grossness, because you sometimes need to know how much content you're going to be putting in place. You open up all of the gates of, I'm now doing formatting work on the wrong side of the formatting barrier. So this is still going to evolve some, but it's doing some nice things effectively, as I was showing in this window here, where all of the formatting is driven through the spans protocol and is managing to show me all of my markup context as well. Since I implemented this, I don't know, I've got 3 or 4 days of work on it, like using it rather than just working on it. And I've fallen in love with having all of my Markdown right there while still having the presentation of the Markdown more reasonably. I haven't found any other editor that does this, and I'd be happy to hear about one if anyone knows other editors that do this. You'd think that there would be a huge ecology of Markdown editor technology happening right now, since every LLM coder is writing code in Markdown. That's really all you can call it, is code, because it's just text that you write only for the machine and you put it in Markdown files. It's not. People are writing this with really crap tools, and this is a little less crap than the other stuff I've had to deal with. So you can read the related work later if you want. It's referred to in the paper, but mostly it's saying, hey, we have lots of editors that do stuff, very few that actually deal with Markdown particularly well. So one of the things that this found to me, though, that I talked about a bit about, is like the B3 spans, the B3 heuristic. And it's a thing that I've never been happy with in Acme, that I think every time I pick up a new machine, one of the things I do is update my Acme code a little bit to fix the heuristics to be the way I want them, to include knowledge about how I want to plumb things and what are the boundaries of things that I want to plumb. And I hate having to sweep a link to plumb it. I'd like it to discover the link. So I do that. I'd like to be able to externalize that into a program, right? I'd like to not have to change the fundamentals of how Acme does the S3 plumbing, or the B3 plumbing. So there's a bunch of this, I think, that starts to show up when code blocks, for instance, would be nice if they were automatically plumbed in the Markdown, or not plumbed, selected. I can't select right now just the text from that. I have to sweep appropriately. And if you're copy pasting all sorts of stuff, you just want code blocks to be live. You want them to be grabbable. So I want that sweeping logic, the heuristics that say how we're going to expand on a click, on a double click, to maybe go through an external tool. You don't want them all to go through. You only want them for where you've specified a span that says this is special and should be treated special. And so we can do that reasonably well with the span data structure and track it. So that's some future work that I'll be taking on that I think is small enough that is sensible to do. So the really sad part is right in the bottom there in the implementation notes. So I did this entirely by making a robot do most of the work. And the robot does a creditable job of building things that work. It built me about 70,000 lines of tests that mostly prove invariants that have to live in Edwood in various ways. It wrote way too much implementation, about 27K lines of code, of which about 5K, 5.5K is the internal Markdown that's going to get ripped out when I decide to finally pull the plug on it. I believe that this is actually about a 3,000 line of code kind of problem, and that's what it should be, and getting the robot to write that is next to impossible. The good news is, now that I know what something that works, and that works well enough, this is now rewritable in a more principled way. And as a prototyping tool, it's been really useful. As a discovering what these robots can do tool, it's been really useful. I'm not real happy with the externalities of it, and I never want anyone to publish, this code back upstream. This is a terrible, terrible code base. There's no other way to say it. It's a terrible, terrible code base. And it sprawls, and it has none of the, it has captured none of the elegance of the original Acme. It's much, much worse. So anyways, that's where it's sitting. It is available on my GitHub. You can grab it there if you want to mess with it, if you want to play with it. I'd be really sad to see anyone try to, I wouldn't want to see this submitted to any of our friends' repositories. I think they deserve better than this. And I think that concludes what I have to say about this, but I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And do we have any questions? If so, please come here and queue up.
From at least from a rendering / layout perspective, it looks like a very large step towards an Acme web browser. Have you tried taking HTML to Markdown conversion tools and see what happens?
I have not tried it. I have thought the thought. I really want to simplify this entire code base before I do that, because it's heinous. I mean, what's interesting is that the machine itself, the LLM, is actually now bad at reading this code. It's just gotten big enough that it just gets shitty at looking at it. And you can ask it to refactor stuff, and it just moves the bottlenecks around. I mean, it's just a mess. We now need to sit down as a human being and actually apply taste to it. Now, what the machine can do in a year, the machine's as stupid as it's ever going to be. And that worries me a little bit. But I really want to simplify this code base before I think about HTML.
I think you mentioned you were saving the prompts or the specification, basically. Are you able to, every few months just run the prompts and regenerate something from scratch that kind of has parity?
Sort of. So my philosophy on using these things at this point, and I have to disclose I do this in my day job with way too much of this, and now a team of engineers who all do this. And as a small business employer, I would be remiss to let my employees turn into a business that doesn't actually work because they're not keeping up fast enough to the changes. I like to start with a spec, say as much as I can about the problem, laid out as cleanly as I can, and then have the machine, have the conversation with the machine about the spec, and that eventually turns into a pile of smaller design documents that get less and less human attention, but more and more machine attention. And then those design documents turn into test specifications, and that's where those 70,000 lines of tests come from. And in theory, if it's done right, those tests are the valuable components. They're the pieces that say, here are the invariants I care about in the system. In practice, I would say about 2/3 of the tests that it produces are way too closely tied to the code rather than to the concepts above it. And so that's awkward. I have blown away the code twice on this and had it rebuild it out of the specs, and they look nothing alike. Like the tests wind up naming things, and so the naming is there, and then I get a whole pile of exception cases. I have it flag me if it needs to change a test because the test is clearly not following the design or conflicting with the implementation. And I get a lot of those, and those are big red flags that the architecture is broken in various ways for how it's thought up and gone down in that direction. I don't yet know how to specify for it the smarter shape that I want this architecture to have in a way that it won't butcher it in a completely different way without writing the code. If I write the code, of course, I can have it fill out a bunch of stuff around it if I need to. But yeah, I think we still don't know how to use these machines. So.
Yeah, not to be a defender of the robots, but so the original Acme is 13,000 lines of code. So
yeah.
27 is just the double. Is not too.
That's the addition.
Ah, okay. That's addition
that
on
is the addition of code
on top of Edwood.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Edwood is much larger than Acme. Edwood is about 3 times Acme.
So it's 40,000 plus 20.
Yeah.
I see. And so you're running it right there.
Yeah. This is running live.
And so how does it do because it's on macOS right now, right?
It's written in Go.
But how does it do the namespaces thing? Like you cannot access like /mnt
no,
editor.
So the namespaces are all happening through Plan 9 port. So Plan 9 port is our friend. And so there's a namespace exposed off of /temp that has a pile of sockets open.
I see.
And
Okay.
that Plan 9 port then abstracts for us. Yeah, come on down to the mic.
What about making this more of a window manager than a text editor, and then working backwards?
It's sort of going in that direction. There's I'll show you. I'll show you the special feature that I added recently. I wrote something called what do I call it? Called dir thumb. And if I run it on this window, look at that. That's a PNG, and I should put a thumbnail there, just in a directory listing. It's not properly clickable. It's not but this was literally like a 3-minute throwaway. Just parse that window, and when you find an image file, put a thumbnail up. If you have 20 thumbnails, then they're all slow to load because it doesn't cache thumbnails. It doesn't do anything intelligent. But it's just sort of a glimmer of some of the things we can do. And so one of the things I've wanted to do now is I want to take the directory listing stuff and pull it out. Like a directory could just be an external program, right? You could just be running dir for that directory, and now it's managing the view for directory listings. And maybe that does better layout. Maybe you get to choose how you do your layout. And it starts turning into, being more of a window system, which I think is mostly what Acme is. It's a very interesting cut and paste aware window system that's opinionated about what it means to copy, and so.
I've had to deal with a few projects, especially at work, of dealing with the robots, and I've run into it every single time where there's some weird edge case that, despite the many lines of code, it just ends up popping up. Are there any that you still notice within this implementation, or have they been resolved, or what's that look like right now?
It's still a world of fragile. So I mean, I use it as my daily driver, but the command line I use, which I can't easily show you because I'm sharing just this window, I should have shared a whole screen instead. I actually always collect my logs. My logs go out and they go to a log file, and when it crashes, it's actually one thing that the robots are great for. I just feed those logs to the robot, and the robot does a damn fine job of finding where I crashed, what were the invariants that I broke. I have a ton more logging output enabled in this thing than I really should. I'm not sure, like when I say I didn't look at performance yet, is that I have, correctness comes before performance as far as I'm concerned. And I'm still, logging a bunch of stuff just for finding those edge cases. I found actually a terrible edge case while working on my slides a couple of days ago, when I found myself clicking in a tag, and it would then stutter and open like slash if my mouse was over slash, and then bounce to the, it would warp the pointer into the directory window and open that first file and bounce down, and it would cascade down the directories. And it was a case of like, what the hell? And I spent like 2 hours with it and the robot, like trying to figure out what was going on. And then I tried another mouse, and it was my right mouse button was clicking. And it's like the worst edge case structure that I have found in a while. And yeah, just literally, we found it because the debugging logs were indicating a bunch of clicks. And then there was a theory that they were synthesized by the mouse move, the warp 2. And it's like, no. And that's where I let myself be misled by the machine to believe it when it said, well, those might be synthesized clicks. It's like, don't listen to the machine too much. Yeah.
One more question?
Yeah.
So I enjoy how you're playing with the UI paradigm here. That's one of the things. I'm not sure how much I would use of this, but the play is really interesting to me. And one thing that especially speaks to me is I deal with multilingual text quite a bit, and you're flying dangerously close to font shaping and font layout here. How much of that bugbear of a problem are you thinking of biting off?
So I have an example of how bad I am at it. I think, here, let's make an example of how bad I am at it. Come on. You remember how to italicize in this Markdown stuff?
It's like underbar or something.
No, that's
bold.
bold.
Or just a single underbar. Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Ooh.
That's how bad I am at text. So
ooh, that's spicy.
Yeah. So fonts are hard, right? You know this.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of making italics work right is that, an italicized font, and most composition fonts aren't a little square.
Right.
Acme's fundamental, to date, text model is a box.
Okay.
And so now, if you want this to work, now you have to start worrying about boxes that overlap or boxes that retract. And it's doable. One of the big chunks of work in here is actually how you map the cursor position back into your text. So it's not so much an issue in the externalized version that we're looking at here, where the cursor positions are rune positions. And
right.
so, we track runes at starts of lines, and we track the Y offset in pixels all the way through. and that makes the mapping relatively straightforward to pick up. But on this side, we don't have all the markup text. And so the rune counts are off. And so there's a dictionary to track like rune offsets all the way through. It's all doable, right? It's just a simple matter of programming. So I would like to do a better job at text, but I haven't been willing to jump off into like the entire compositing pipeline implied by Unicode multilingual and
Yeah, especially with you get non-strictly left to right language stuff.
it's a thing I think of like more regularly than I should. My day job involves increasing amounts of internationalization that we haven't had to deal with in the past, and it's just gross. So we're throwing away our UX and going entirely to open API calls to make other people deal with that problem.
All right, thank you very much.
Skip.
Yeah, it's more of a comment. Hi. Given that Acme's original inspiration was Oberon, and Oberon did have like essentially you could intersperse text and I remember like the animated GIF that was like one of the first demos in there. I'm wondering if you know anything in terms of the history as to why that kind of capability wasn't in or isn't in Acme.
Simplicity. Like Rob says it himself. Like if you ask him about Oberon and company, he'll just say, "Yeah, it was just way too complicated. I just wanted to do text." So, yeah.
Do you have any idea how your implementation compares to the Oberon implementation?
Not a clue. I have never read a line of Oberon implementation, unfortunately. So, I think it's fairly radically different because Oberon doesn't. Oberon still did its programs internally. So whereas this is entirely externalized over a fairly low bandwidth link, right? If you think of it that way, just a text link to set up all of the layouts.
I mean, it seems like you just give the real estate of pixels to anything and just say you're in charge.
Well, so this is one of the things that I want to do is when I do give a box command in my spans to say there's a box here and it's this size, I'd like that to be a canvas that can be drawn into. And it could just be libdraw, right? We can just, just here's a handle to that canvas, and the canvas is externalized, and you can just use it. But that comes perilously close to this other space.
Yeah, and there's actually a question on Discord. How are you doing the rendering of images, for example, in here, if not with draw?
Oh, it's all with draw.
Okay.
It's all libdraw. It's just how you set it up, how you queue it up. So, yeah. This works over draw term. It just works.
Yeah, thought there. If you're going to go and give programs canvas, make it Rio compatible. Give it a Rio compatible file system.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we have a window manager. It's really terrifying. So.
So I just had a question on the multilingual in general. So like minus the text shaping, how do you deal with like fallback fonts for different languages, deciding which fallback font to use, normalizing height, like all those types of problems?
Oh, I don't.
Okay, so currently, yeah. So if you, yeah, okay, that's fair, yeah.
No, that's the fundamental. So I'm being opinionated on what I want in here, and as far, for instance, there is a font family involved, right? We have different sizes of text, and there's and bolded and italic, and I require the structure of your font package to be in a particular way. Right now, I think the only fonts that satisfy this are the Go fonts that were released a little while back. They all have italic, they have bold, they have a nice sizing structure. It works through font serve. I have a custom font serve that I'm using for my world that anti-aliases differently than 9 fronts because I have a different display than whoever was working on it in 9 front, and I'm not making a value judgment. I'm making but I needed better than I could get there. Although it's still not good enough. I don't take appropriate advantage of hinting in TrueType, and that does bad things for small typefaces. But I'm on a high pixel display,
So just like the multilingual in general, like I see you have the Mac IME enabled. So like, do you integrate with maybe the IME completion when you want to like partially type?
I think it works. I think
it does. It does. Okay.
I think
yeah.
it just
I
works.
want to try it.
I've typed in French in here.
Okay, French. Yeah.
So that's most of the world. It's not a very complicated extra keyboard. So,
okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like that's it. And, Thank you very much again.
You're very welcome.